Welcome, everyone, officially to the Research and Rolodex crash course, How to Find the Contacts and Venues That Fit Your Work with Leah. Now, before we get started, I would like to take a moment to thank this month's sponsor. It's Kingsman Editing. They provide a range of editing services for all types of authors. You can learn more at kingsmanediting.com/editing-request, and I will have this link at the YouTube channel if you need an easier way to remember where to go, and I'll also put that link into the chat. So thank you, Kingsman, for sponsoring these free sessions and my free newsletter, Electric Speed. Now, on to the main show. I want to tell you a little bit about Leah before turning things over to her. She has more than 25 years of publishing industry experience. I was fortunate to meet her in person at the US Book Show this year, and I also saw her again at the Agents People of Publishing conference. She is the founder of Press Shop PR and Book Publicity School, and she has worked on many books and bestsellers, some of which I am sure you have heard of, like March by John Lewis, On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, as well as books by Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Neil deGrasse Tyson, among others. So, Leah, I'm going to hand things over to you. I will stop my screen share, and I won't interrupt unless I feel like there is a burning question we have to answer.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. So nice to be here, and thank you, Jane, for having me. I have some slides, but first, want to just give a little big picture of what we're going to be talking about. Um, so one of the things when I'm talking to authors about how to promote their books, and there's a few things that are sort of true across every campaign, and that can be a hard thing to say because obviously every book is different. It depends how you go about promoting it depends on your profile, the topic, the genre, the publisher, but there really are two components of every campaign. Um, so one of them we are going to focus on today, and that is who are you going to reach out to? So that is about building a media list, an outreach list. Um, you have to get the information about your book to the right people. The other pillar of every campaign is your press materials, your pitch, how you position your book. Um, Both of those two things need to be in place for there to be a successful campaign. So you have to have a really compelling press material, pitch, way to get people interested in your work. And then you have to get that to the right people. And getting it to the right people, you have to have a good media list. So that is what we're going to talk about today. That second element, the media list. You can have the best pitch materials in the world, have written an absolute masterpiece, and if you're not getting it to the right people, not so much happens. So that's what we're going to dive into today. So here we are. Let me see. Okay, so what we're going to cover. I'm going to talk about how to organize your media sheet. Um, we are going to talk about how some of the best ways to go about building the list by researching little hacks that we use all the time while we are promoting books. We're going to do a deep dive into a bunch of different categories that you can start to fill out. Um, and then a little bit about how to tell if places are worth reaching out to, how to note, this might be not a great spot for me for all sorts of reasons. So, let us dive in. So, first off, your media sheet in general should be a spreadsheet. Doesn't matter what kind. If you don't have a spreadsheet yet, for book promotion, start one today. It doesn't really matter what it is, if it's Google Sheets or Airtable or Excel, whichever you feel the most comfortable with. But it's really in this kind of media environment where there is so much going on, everybody is so busy. In order to promote your book, you really need to have a holistic approach, it's pretty hard to do without a spreadsheet. So definitely open one of those up. And then you can use it for, um, gathering your ideas, finding context, kind of having them in different tabs based on what exact type of contact it is, how you're going to be reaching out to them. And then later when you are actually reaching out, you can use it as a tracking system as well. Um, so it really does, it really can focus, it really can serve three purposes that, your directory of contacts, a source for all of your research, and then a way to keep yourself organized as you go forward. So this is just a sample. Of what one can look like. You want to make sure to include um, the outlet, any notes you can. I think when you are doing this work, when you first start, you very well may feel like, oh, like, okay, this is, Bob Smith. I'm going to remember. I just looked up all his stuff. He seems great. Probably once you get going, you're going to look back and be like, who in the world is Bob Smith? I can't remember. So err on the side of putting more into this media sheet. This is a really, the way the media environment, the information ecosystem that we are working and living in, all of us, is really fast moving. It is really fractured. People are getting their information from so many different sources. So in order to reach people, you really do need to err on the side of a more robust campaign. When people are getting their information from so many different places, you need to be in a lot of different places. So your sheet should, I don't know, I keep saying that. Your media sheet should, your media sheet should reflect that and be very robust itself. So as you'll see along the bottom there, if you use any sort of spreadsheet, you'll know that you can have different tabs. I always think it's good to really be organized with those tabs so that any particular type of research is in that tab. So this is one example of how you can do it. Okay, so the first thing that I always suggest when people are starting out building a research list is to think about comp titles. You've probably heard the term. I know Jane talks about it. From a publicity point of view, a comp title is one that a book that has some similarity to yours, such that if a certain media outlet has covered this book, there's a decent chance they'll be interested in your book as well. So you want to kind of try to find a bunch of those. You want to, for publicity oriented titles, if you're using it for publicity purposes, you really want to make sure that it came out in the past year or two. Um, Media is moving really fast. There are so many changes that if you start using books that came out 3 or 4 or 5 years ago for publicity research, you just end up with too many outlets that folded or people that switched jobs. So you want to keep it pretty current. But one element of coming up with some calm titles, and then the first step really is to then do a deep dive into where this book got covered, what led to its success. So when you are picking the calm titles, you also want to keep in mind that you want to look for titles that got attention, that landed in the market in a way that you would like your book to end up. So we got maybe it's a book where there's some thematic similarity to yours, and you kept seeing it pop up on podcasts, or you were on Substack, or you checked this, is at a book festival. So books that did well in their launch in a way that you would like to emulate for your own book. That's sort of the type of book that you should look for when you're coming up with comp titles. And then you want in your spreadsheet to just do a really big dive into the internet, look up everything that happened for that book. So, all right, this book, it looks like it got, two trade reviews. It was in Kirkus and Library Journal. Maybe it got a feature in the local paper. Maybe it got a review in two online venues. They were on four podcasts. They went to a festival. Um, and it looks like they had a pretty robust campaign promoting their work on LinkedIn. Say that's, for example. Um, that's really helpful for a number of reasons as you're starting out this work. Um, the first one is that it takes it out of the abstract. One thing I hear from authors all the time is like, I have no idea where to even start. The media world is crazy. Every place I used to look for book recommendations has folded. Um, you know, Getting out of that space of feeling sort of paralyzed and not knowing where to start, this is really good exercise for that because it's just takes it out of the abstract. It's like, well, this is how it happened. This is what happened. This. So that's one thing that's really good for it. And then it also gives you a start to your own media list. If you start, put in these podcasts and then you think, oh, you know what? Okay, that looks like a great podcast for me too. Bam, it's on your media list. So try and find a bunch of those comp titles and just do a lot of digging around online. You can help various algorithms can help you if it's on Amazon or Goodreads or if you liked this book, you can put that into see if they have any other suggestions. Another thing you can sometimes do is look at who blurbed some of your comp titles because typically blurbers are people in a similar genre that have been successful. So sometimes that can be a good way to do it. You can look online. Sometimes Perplexity AI is a very good research tool. So sometimes you can, check in with that and see if they can give you some more comp titles. So that's where I always suggest starting. Um, all right. So the next thing you want to do when you're building out your media list, and you might want to do this in its own tab on the media sheet, is thinking about topic writers, people who cover your topic or your genre. So one of the big things that's really important is that you have to think more broadly than the book page now. So, if you published a book 10 years ago, um, a lot of the publicity may have been by the in-house publicist reaching out to book editors at all the various venues. Unfortunately, a lot of those big book pages that, are more of the, legacy media, a lot of them don't exist anymore. So the places that do still have book review coverage, this is what their desks look like. They get every single book from every single publicist in the land. So, and that's great. I'm not saying at all that reaching out to book editors, that your in-house publicist reaching out to the book editors about your book is not worthwhile. It absolutely is. It's just that you as a writer, and also publicists as well, need to think beyond the book page. You need to think about people who can cover your book from a subject matter point of view. And there are plenty of ways to get coverage for a book that are not just a standard book review. So think about what the topics are, and you want to make a column there and start filling that out. So, not to beat a dead horse, but this is what you don't want to get stuck in this pile when it's coming up to when it comes time for your media list. You want to have a much more robust and targeted list for your book than this. Okay, so when I talk about topics, it doesn't necessarily mean that your book has to be like about, organic farming or something. It doesn't have to be so specific as that. It can be also a theme. If there's, if you are writing, historical fiction is always based in the South, and maybe people who cover, the South could potentially be interested in your book. So you can think about it more broadly than just exactly what the topic is if you are writing fiction. Um, but you want to come up with any, any category that you can imagine people would be interested in covering your book from. So, people who write about, they cover a certain area of the country. Those would be people that you should look into. And then you really start doing a deep dive. You can start with Google, like who covers, American history. So you can look at different journals. You can look at um, social media. I'm going to get into all of the ways you can look at it, but the first step is really thinking about the different categories of topics that you can build into your list. And there very well may be more than one. You might have a sort of memoir that has, about parenting, but is also about maybe like moving off grid. So maybe, that's two different categories, sort of green living and parenting that you could build on in. So some ways that you can do this, and what you're looking for, to be clear, is people and or venues that focus on these topics. So parenting, for example, you know first step, just parenting editor, put it into Google, see what happens. Put it into Perplexity, like who are the top parenting editors, who are the parenting people who write about parenting on Substack. Just do a lot of searching around on Google. You can look on Google News. A lot of times when you start doing this kind of research, you'll find different things that lead you to other good things. So maybe it will be like an organization of parenting editors, and then you look there and look at their members, things like that. When you do this research, you want to both have a clear focus of what you're looking for, but also be open to kind of diving around online. Um, so you can also use social media, so something like LinkedIn, if you're using parenting, for example, go to LinkedIn and put in parenting editor in the search button and see who pops up. Maybe you'll find a couple there. You throw them into your parenting tab on your media sheet. Um, you also can use, any of the podcast players. They all have search functions. You can poke around in there and see what comes up if you post there. If you find outlets so for example, a parenting focused outlet, then you can go over to Google and just put that outlet and masthead in, and sometimes that will pop up. A lot of times outlets have a masthead that they don't make super prominent on their website. But sometimes it will come up if you just post masthead, and then you'll find a whole bunch of names to add to your list of parenting editors. Um, you can also poke around and see if you find, for example, there's a great parenting editor. They seem like they're really in the conversation. Maybe you see who they're following or who they're interacting with or who's following them. Um, a lot of the social media places, a lot of social media platforms where you can see people's followers. It is a really great source of information in terms of tracking people's communities. If somebody's really plugged into a certain community, you can kind of plug in by seeing who they're interacting with. Um, so that is another thing you can do. The other thing I would say is that, podcasts these days in publicity, book promotion are pretty big. It's, where a lot of media and sort of legacy media is struggling. The podcast space is booming. It can be good for selling books. There, some caveats there, and that you don't want to, have too many hour-long podcast episodes that gives too much of the book away. But in general, podcasts really should be a part of your campaign. So I would, even just make a separate tab on your media list of podcasts. And for that, you really want to, use those podcast players to look around for where your comp authors have spoken. If you find podcasts that are seem really perfect for your book, you can see who else they've spoken to, and then maybe go do another deep dive into where else that person has spoken. Um, you also can use the algorithms on the podcast player. So if you find a show that seems really perfect for you, a lot of them will say, "Oh, you also might like to subscribe to this one and this one and this one." Okay, go check those out and see if those are good for you as well, and if they belong on your media list. Um, so a couple, things to be aware of with podcasts. The barrier to entry for podcasts is really low, so there's a lot of them, and then it's kind of a heavy lift to make a podcast. So what you're going to find is there are a lot of podcasts that go for a bit and then people abandon them. So you do want to make sure that any podcast you add to your media list is still producing shows, that they were producing them pretty regularly. It's hard to have a really dedicated listenership if you only post once every like 6 weeks. So, check to make sure that they are consistent in posting and they seem to have an audience. Obviously, the number of reviews can be helpful in figuring out how listened to a particular show is. Um, I will say one thing that's really nice about podcasts is that they do have a longer tail. If you appear in a radio show, it goes out and people hear it or they didn't hear it. Although a lot of radio shows now are being broadcast as podcast as well, so that that solves that problem when that does happen. But in general, if there is live TV, live radio that is not broadcast, you get a bump, an initial bump, but then it goes away. And that can be great. Don't get me wrong. I love the live shows that get that initial boost, especially when it's right around publication. Podcasts function in a slightly different way in that people listen to podcasts. When they subscribe, sometimes they'll find a new podcast and they go look through the archives and download the episodes they want. Maybe they listen or they hear or they read a review or hear you at a book festival and then they go looking for a podcast with you. So it does have a sort of longer tail, and less of an immediate bump. Um, but podcasts are definitely a big part of a campaign, so don't skimp on that research. Radio, you always want to make sure to reach radio. There's a lot more to radio than just the big national NPR shows. There are tons of regional NPRs. Obviously, they're struggling now a bit with the funding cuts. But there's still a lot of shows there that you can look around and see, if they might have a particular show specifically about your area. If that might feature a local author. A lot of those regional NPR shows do have staff pages, so you can find out the contacts fairly easily. You can poke around for Sirius XM shows. If your book has some international appeal, don't, poke around on some of the other international, I think BBC, ABC Australia, CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Company. And then there's also a whole bunch of community radio. So, definitely do some deep dives in there. I think when you're looking for radio, there's a lot of different search terms you can look at, and you'll also find a lot of radio by doing some good comp title research, particularly on books where people have had publicists, because the publicists are going to know about these shows and set their authors up there. So another thing on your media sheet, you should have a tab for local news. Like don't forget that as a category. You want to put it in its own tab because when it does come time to reaching out, you want it in a separate space. What you write to those people is going to be necessarily different. You're going to focus on the location. Um, but you want to, look into like all the places that could cover local, a local author. So for that, you absolutely look for some local authors as comps. They don't even often need to be that similar because reason a local venue is covering a local author is probably not because of the particular topic or venue, but rather because of their location. So you can, if you wrote some book like a sci-fi book, but you saw that this, work of, essays was by a local editor was covered, that's fine. That works for a local comp author. Um, so definitely keep that in mind. Local coverage always loves something local. So if there is something, an event that you can peg it to, that's always really useful. But when you are pitching them, make sure that don't bury what should be the lead in this case, which is, hey, I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin, or wherever it is. Um, okay, so this is another sheet that I always, for all of our campaigns at Press Shop, we have a lot of different tabs of different people we're going to be contacting, and then we have a top targets sheet. And the way I think of this is it's almost an antidote to the rest of the sheets. Um, all the things I've been talking about is, it's a lot that's there. I know that, you know, there are no quick fixes in promoting your book. It does take a bunch of work, and what I just described is, it's there's a lot to it. There's a lot of different places that you can look and that you should look in order to reach readers in all the spaces where they are getting information. But um, what I mean by this sheet sort of being um, something that helps make that other stuff more manageable is that, yes, all of those things are great, and yet you want to keep your eye on the ball. So, you don't want to get so bogged down in finding all these, every last person that you forget, oh, LitHub is my favorite, like, place to read about books. I would love it if my book were covered there. Don't let that get lost in the mix. So maybe LitHub is one of your top targets. So your top targets are sort of maybe five targets, maybe 10 that are feasible for your book, but would make you really happy if they came through. So you want both elements. You don't want your top targets to, only be fresh air or something like that, where it's like virtually impossible. You want it to be feasible, but you want to have this as something that you keep coming back to keep you on target. So say, you're going around, you're, reaching out to a bunch of bookstores and some festivals and, podcasts, and you're working with your in-house publicist on this other stuff. You want to then, okay, let me just sit and look at my top targets. Oh, right. I would love to be, let me revisit LitHub. I've tried that person. I didn't hear back. Let me revisit the site, see if there's another way I could fit into it. And maybe there's a different editor that covers this other type of coverage. Let me go back to that. So top targets is really useful for that purpose, and just to sort of stop the overwhelm. Um, all right, so some things to keep in mind when you're doing this. We talked a little bit about some red flags for podcasts, which are, not really posting anymore, not posting frequently enough, or having no reviews, or just, a couple. That's not necessarily a red flag, but a sign that you probably might not be worth pursuing. Um, there. are things though that you should be careful of. Obviously, if there's just tons of pop-up ads, that's usually, or the graphics, or if it does any sort of wonky stuff, that's a definite sign. Request for payment for promotion. I mean, if you're doing a campaign that's more marketing based and you're doing that kind of thing, fine. But if you are thinking about this from a earned media publicity point of view, that really shouldn't be happening. Um, you always want to keep in mind that you want to, if there is something, if somebody is reaching out to you, the time when you want to do the really more intense, like, all right, let me actually make sure this is a good fit, is, if they come and are requesting an interview and, I'd love a PDF of your book. Then you stop and just, all right, let's just check who this is. Can you tell that they are affiliated with an outlet? Are maybe take a look at their social media, make sure they don't seem off the rocker. um, you want to do a little bit of due diligence like that, particularly in this media environment. If you are talking about an issue that has any sort of political or social resonance where people are gonna, potentially use it in a way that you might not like. So just be mindful. That does happen sometimes. I have seen recently with some books we've been working with, they got some incoming requests from venues where we knew it wasn't going to be a friendly interview. Obviously, they didn't say that in the request. But knowing the national conversation right now, it was quite clear that it wouldn't be a friendly interview. So you do need to keep that in mind if you are working in a topic that is a little bit fraught. Um, so those are some things to keep in mind. Just don't mean to scare anyone, but just go in eyes wide open. Um, so then the other thing I would say is that when you are finding all of this information, throwing into your sheet, first of all, I always think find the places and the people first. Don't worry so much at the beginning about, like, finding out exactly the right email address. If you find, for example, like this is a radio show that would be so perfect, put that in there, put the link in. You can come back later and fill in the exact contacts. But to give you um, a sort of primer on which types of people you're looking for. You usually don't want to put people that are, editor-in-chief or an executive editor or executive producer. Those people are too high up in their organizations and they're not really taking pitches usually. You want to find, like associate editors, senior editors, people like that, or writers or columnists or producers. Those are the places, like on a masthead. You don't want to go too high. You don't want to go too low to, maybe editorial assistants, for example. They're not going to have enough sway. You want that middle space. And those are good people. Those are the people that are fielding queries and pitches and deciding on coverage. Okay, so how to find email addresses. This is a big, this is a hard part. I do always want to say that don't stress too much about this. If you find the name and you can't find an email address, and if you're working with a publisher and you have a publicist, you can ask them. Every publicist has paid services that they subscribe to that have a lot of email addresses. They don't have all of them, of course, but if you are like, oh, this reviewer would be so amazing. I saw that they reviewed this book and that book, and they're so similar. I'd love to, reach out to them and I cannot find, or I'd love for you, the in-house publicist, to reach out, but I can't find the email, they might be able to find it really easily. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing is most media people have email addresses that are formulas for the outlet. They don't. Um, Usually advertise that, but they usually, if you find one email address from a particular outlet, you can usually figure out the rest of them. One little trick is that they often make advertising emails more readily available for obvious reasons. They want it to be easy for businesses to find their advertising contact. So sometimes that will help you find the email formula. Sometimes the mastheads will have the email addresses. That's true a lot at the regional NPR shows. Um, there are different tools like Hunter.io. I'm sure there's a million new ones that have cropped up in the past 2 weeks from with AI. So you can poke around there. Um, a lot of times if you can email through the website and then you left click or right click, I mean, the email address will show up. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Um, if you're absolutely desperate and you can't find it and it looks like the absolute most perfect person in the world, you could potentially try first name, last name at Gmail. We have done it and it often works. Um, Obviously, not great to build your entire campaign by doing that, but in a pinch, you can try that. Um, all right, so I think that was most of the material I wanted to share. I am happy to answer questions because I know I just downloaded a lot of information. So I would imagine there are a lot of questions.
We do have quite a number of questions. That was fantastic, Leah. Thank you. I put in the chat as you were wrapping up on the email research that I use Hunter frequently. I use it as a Chrome extension,
Mhm.
and I find it's actually really successful. I don't even pay for it, and it's pretty successful for me. But
Yeah, yeah.
okay, so Lindsay was asking about a recommended timeline for how early to start this work in advance of publication day or by type of media. Like, when would you start pitching podcasts or contacting
Yeah.
editors?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that if you, the work of actually pitching, I would say that's in the months before publication. So longer lead your in-house publicist, if you have one, will start doing the book reviews and the trades at that like 6 months-ish before pub. A lot of the other types of coverage is more in the like 2 to 4 months before publication. I mean, in general, lead times have just shrunk across the board. Everything is just fast in large part because you can, interview someone and press post and it is published. So those built-in timelines from earlier days are have really condensed. So I would say most of the outreach is in those couple months before publication, but in terms of doing the work that I described today, it's good to start with more time because you probably noted that that doesn't sound like something you can just do in an afternoon.
Yes.
So, um, it's much better and less overwhelming if you can just say, like, all right, like Tuesday and Thursday for 45 minutes for the next 6 months, I'm gonna just dive into building my research list. So I always think that the more time, the better for that process.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for my second edition of my book, I started brainstorming about a full year out. And actually, since it was a second edition, I had like the 5 years in between the first and the second to just compile notes about, oh, that looks like a good outlet. When my book releases again, I need to reach out to that one. So,
yeah, totally.
okay, Melissa has a question, and I'm going to switch the view here. There we go. Melissa wonders if you could completely marionette a new commercial fiction author, is there anything specifically you would want them to do? And are there particular mistakes that you see commercial fiction authors make?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think this is true sort of across the board for marketing and publicity, is that you just want to really be really clear about your audience and how you're going to reach them and what your sort of top line message is. I mean, that's really what you need to get attention. And I think it can be hard because you have this story in your head and you're thinking about the craft, and that's fantastic. And it can be a little hard to sort of put on that sort of marketing hat, but even just a little bit of thought earlier in the process really goes a long way to being able to, you know, when the time comes, successfully and easily pivot to promotion mode because you've already thought that through and you know what you have, you know your audience, you know what they're going to be interested in and what message they're going to respond to. So if you can do that earlier, that's definitely for the best.
Terrific. Jinsei says, when you're reaching out, when you're promoting your book, do you need to send potential contacts a free copy? And there's the added note, we've tried that with a nonfiction caregiving book with zero response.
Uh, so you've tried what? The giving of a free book, is that
Yes, yes.
okay? Yeah, I mean, when you're reaching out, when we're reaching out, won't reach out with the book at first. Usually we have a pitch, we'll put together a pitch. We always put together a Q&A. That's sort of part of the sort of that other pillar I was talking about, like what the materials are you sent. And then we say, can I send you a copy of the book? So, if they respond and say yes, fantastic, go forth. If they haven't responded, one thing that I think is one of the most important things for everyone to keep in mind is that, and it can be a little harder for authors doing it themselves, is that you just have to follow up. The first one email, everybody is so insanely crazy these days and so busy. I mean, I get so many emails where I'm like, that sounds great, and then it gets buried. So you really do need to follow up. I almost don't even think the first email counts. That's just a starter warm up.
I think that is a great headline to put on a lot of efforts. The first email does not count. Uh, Terrific. Okay. So, kind of extending that conversation a little bit, Tanya is wondering when you're asked for a copy of the book, and let's assume you're sending a physical package, what should you include in it? Should the copy be signed? Should there be a bookmark? Should there be a note from the author? Like, what do you put in there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always suggest putting in whatever pitch materials you create. I think the purpose of pitch materials is to show people why the book is compelling, why their audience, their readership, their followers, their listenership should be interested in your book. So if that's what you're going to be sending to people to get them to request the book, then they get the book. And again, going back to how busy people are, there's no guarantee that once that book that they just requested arrives in their mailbox, they're going to remember what it is. So make sure you include the pitch materials that got them to bite in the first place with your book. I think that's more important than, I mean, whatever. If you have a great bookmark or whatever, like that's lovely. But in terms of getting coverage, you need to make it as easy as possible for people to cover your book. And so what do they need? What does a journalist need to cover your book? They need a story. They need to know how their audience is going to respond, how and why their audience is going to respond, and to what type of presentation about your book. So I would definitely include that. If you are thinking about an interview, a Q&A is a really good thing to include as part of your press materials.
Kristen says with film festivals, there is a pecking order. For example, you have to hit Sundance first or they won't consider your film. So, is there a similar pecking order for which media to contact first for your book so they don't reject you if you've already been on lesser outlets?
Um, I mean, I think that, there is a sort of general order for books that are the lead titles where they're going to have major national campaigns. Then you need to be really careful of that. There are competitive outlets at some of the national NPR shows, at some of the morning shows, things like that. Um, but I think beyond that, it's less important than you would think. I mean, again, and I know I said this a couple times, but I cannot stress to you enough, like the media environment is insane right now.
Mhm.
There's so little, there's a pretty good chance that there's not going to be any overlap, that the by far the thing that is more important is getting out there to audiences that seem like good targets as much as you can. I think a lot of times worrying about the overlap with this, or I don't know, did somebody else write to that person? It's so much less of a problem than the fact that everyone is so busy, so overwhelmed. There's so much competition for people's attention, so many different types of content for people to um, engage with. So that's your biggest issue that you're facing. So I would go forth as in the most robust fashion as possible to handle that bigger problem more than anything.
Terrific. As a side note, I thought you'd like to know, it looks like one of your former clients has joined. Sheila Shapiro says that you work together. Or no, a podcast
Oh,
person,
yes,
maybe.
yes,
She had
yes,
a,
yes. We worked on. I think some of our authors have been on her fantastic show.
yeah. Um, do you recommend any media databases? And what, if there are any that you recommend, can you give us a sense of the cost?
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, they're expensive. So there's Cision is one that's been around for a long time. It's probably a couple thousand a year. That one can be good if you sort of have if you want to blast out to like a lot of people on a sort of niche topic, that it can be good. It can also just be good for going in and finding email formulas and putting in specific contacts. But that's probably, I think the prices range. I think they tend to give different prices depending on who's asking.
Mhm.
But definitely couple thousand at least. There's Muckrack, which is better in a lot of ways. It is drawn from social media, so it's sort of a contact base that database that updates itself because it's drawing from people's social media profiles. So that can be more effective in that way. And then it also links with their posts. So it has that benefit, but that one is more expensive. Again, I think it varies, but probably like five-ish thousand a year. Um, there's Podchaser, which is for podcasters. I think everyone can check that out for free, but it doesn't give contacts.
Mm.
That one is less expensive, and I can't remember the exact fee. Um, but that if you do pay for it, it gives you email addresses. Sometimes they're totally bizarre, and you're like, it's there are no foolproof.
Yeah.
There's there's issues with all of them.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. All right. Joel says if I've written and published articles on the subject of my book, when I'm pitching media outlets, should I pitch for coverage of the book, for me to write an article on the subject, or both?
yeah, so I mean, I think it depends on what the outlet, or who the person is that you're writing to. If it seems like the kind of place where they, commission a lot of work and it's, you have a piece that you can pitch them. great, that might be a good way to cover it. If it's a place that does mostly interviews or Q&As, then maybe you put yourself forward as the interview subject. So I think you want to think always about like, all right, this person that I found, what do they need? How could they cover me? Like what would that look like? You have to think what they need. Think like the journalists. Like what is it that they need to cover your book? And if it's like, oh, they are the ones that are just commissioning all these pieces, first person pieces from authors or first person essays, okay, then give them a first person essay about your research techniques or whatever it is. So I think you really want to always flip it in your head that it's not sort of what, how you would like it to be covered, but how does it fit
Mhm.
into their work? It's all of media relations is sort of like a puzzle. You have a book and you have a media outlet, and how are you going to fit these two pieces together? And it varies from venue to venue and contact to contact.
Yeah. We have a nonfiction author who wonders what's the best way to divide up the work if you have an in-house publicist at your publishing company versus a publicist you hire.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think the first step is, you want to just make sure everyone's on the same page and know what's happening. I mean, the way when we are working at Press Shop, where we are hired by authors, and we are often working with in-house publicists, is, to start out, we always are just, get a sense of what the in-house publicist is doing. We leave that to them. We don't want to step on their toes. We get a sense like, all right, we're going to be doing this. We're going to, the national NPRs, a couple regional, the book review and the trades. Okay, great. We're not doing that. And then we sort of go forth outside of that. So I think encouraging, your independent publicist will probably have something similar to say like that. And there's just no shortage of venues. It's really not very hard these days to not step on each other's toes because, again, there's so many places out there. So, if we are working on a book and they are doing the book review venues, like, okay, we're not even going to the Times Book Review. They have that handled. Um, I think though, when you get outside of those big major people and contacts, then you just don't want to worry too much about it after that. Because again, it's just going to slow you down. We've had some people that were just like, oh, well, can you send me this? And let's all put it in this list. And it's like, that is hours of busy work for
Mm.
literally no purpose. It slows everybody down. The worst thing I've ever seen happen from accidentally emailing somebody that the in-house person was dealing with is them writing back and saying, oh, I'm dealing with Mary. We're on it. I'm like, okay, great. Done. So,
It's not the end of the world. All right. Kristen is wondering, how do you reach out and market to book clubs? And I think here I'm going to have to like narrow the question down or at least split it into two questions. There's like the celebrity book clubs, like the ones with the names you've heard of, like Jenna Bush or Reese Witherspoon. And then there are also book clubs that, meet at libraries or stores or, the things that run by people you have not heard of, by your next door neighbor. So how do you look at book club marketing?
yeah. So, I mean, I think the celebrity space is often handled in-house, and that is one of the places or the types of coverage that does have a tremendously long lead time. Like they are pitching people like a year in advance. So that's usually done by the publisher. Um, I would say for the smaller book clubs, I mean, we don't do a huge amount of that because we focus more on media, but it's really about putting together a really good package. And just like with everything, it's like finding the context, finding networking, finding people that are running the book clubs. There's, of course, it can be harder to find those community-based book clubs, but doing your networking, making sure that the materials you have are suited to book clubs, like there's a discussion group and all of that, also sort of answering the question of, okay, what does this person need to be able to go forward here. Um, and I think with everything, it's with every element of book promotion, whether it's pitching to national NPR or the local book club, there's just legwork involved, and there's you have to position the book in a way that makes their job easier, even if the job is just picking a book for the book club. So always just keeping in mind, like, the person that I'm making this ask of, what do they need, and giving that to them.
Yeah. All right. The question that comes up every time there's a publicity discussion, how much does it cost to hire a publicist?
Yeah. Um, so it varies. There's tons of different types of book publicists out there, and that focus on different genres and different types of campaigns. Um, I will say that leading book publicity campaigns, as you could probably tell from this presentation, is time consuming. So it's not cheap hiring somebody who is going to do all of that work and has all the experience and contacts. So you can sometimes it ranges, like on the higher end, it's like 20 to 40,000 for a campaign. You can find people to do smaller, more targeted campaigns, maybe in the 5 to 10,000. But it really varies on what you're looking for, how much experience they have, how long the campaign is going to be, what it includes. Um, so there are a lot of factors.
There's a follow-up question here as far as how do you know if it's worth that sort of outlay? And I mean, I can say that the advice I always give to writers is don't spend money you don't have because you're not going to get a one-to-one likely reward.
Mhm.
Like for
Yeah.
every publicity dollar you spend, it's probably not going to come back to you in the form of sales. But outside of that, how do you tell authors whether or not
Yeah.
you think it's worth it?
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, I think you want to be really clear. Well, first of all, about if don't spend the money you don't have, that's definitely great advice. But then you also want to be really careful about, thinking through your goals. Like, what are your goals for publicity? If they are only book sales and only recouping your money over the course of the campaign, like you just said, I would not do it. It's really hard to say that. That will definitely happen. Um, so I think thinking through your goals, what do you want from a campaign? Like, when people hire us at Press Shop, a lot of times they have different things in mind. So they are, maybe other goals are, maybe they're up for tenure and they feel like getting this publicity is going to be helpful, or another job. Maybe they are active on the speaking circuit and they have paid speaking gigs and they think this will get them out there and get them more speaking gigs. Maybe they want to lay the groundwork for their writing career, and maybe they don't have an agent for this book, but they want to get one for their next book, and this will help them get an agent. Or maybe they have an agent and they want their agent to be able to sell their next book to a bigger publisher or for a bigger advance. So, like, all of those factors, publicity can help with all of those elements. So you kind of have to make an evaluation for yourself. Like, does this make sense given, these other things that could come out of it? So that's one thing. And then, I mean, the other thing at Press Shop that we always do when people query us about working with them for a full campaign is, I mean, we always want to be just really, really clear about what we think will happen.
Mm.
Publicity is not like advertising. It's not a sure thing, but if you're working with a publicist who has experience, they generally have a pretty good idea of what's likely. So that's not to say that any one outlet is like a sure thing, but I always like to see, like, all right, in this general tier, like, so maybe it's like, Slate, Salon, Huffington Post. Like, I feel like a bunch of those will come through in this category of like 20. I can't say all, but like, I feel good about that category. And then we're going to reach up and try and get some of the higher tier, more competitive ones as well. We never want to make those coming through the mark of success for a campaign because they are so competitive. And then we want to like reach down and get a whole bunch of the sort of maybe more targeted niche small art outlets that, maybe they only have, a couple hundred downloads per episode, but like all those people are going to love your book. So we always sort of like to be able to visualize that. Um, and I think that's a good thing if you are thinking about hiring a publicist to just make sure that whoever you're talking to can do that and that what they are envisioning aligns with what you are hoping for.
Yeah. I think one of the best things I heard from an author on this topic, someone who had paid a significant amount to a publicist, was that it just increased their visibility generally, like it boosted their platform for years, and they saw kind of the trickle effects over a very long period of time. So while in the immediate aftermath, they were like, I'm not sure that was worth it. They saw after, seeing how it affected their next book's marketing and publicity, like they already had some relationships in place. And
Mhm.
I thought that was a really thoughtful way of
Yeah.
discussing it. And I think it mirrors what you just said, that it had,
Hmm.
knowing what your goals are and what you're expecting to
Hmm.
get out of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
We've reached our time. I want to make sure that, Leah, people know about what you offer. There's obviously the press shop that, people could hire you for a publicity campaign, but you also have book publicity school. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's in that offering?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So Book Publicity School is our sister company to Press Shop. And basically the idea is that there's a lot of work authors have to really be proactive to promote their books. A lot of authors are like, "Ah, I don't know how to do that." And so that is what we teach at Book Publicity School. So basically we take all of the insights, experience, tips, tricks that we have gleaned over the years of promoting books at Press Shop and then share it with authors at Book Publicity School in the form of workshops, coaching. We've got a couple different programs. We've got a 6-week intensive, which is really fun. We offer that once a quarter. So once each season, the next one is in January. And it's 6 weeks where we sort of go through all the different elements of publicity to really get you what you need to know to, either be a good partner to your in-house publicist, to do your own publicity, to give you a better sense of how to hire a publicist, to just be a more informed author. It's very hard to be effective in promoting your book if you don't really understand how the publishing industry works, you don't understand how the media industry works. Publicity sort of falls right in the intersection of publicity, media, and publishing, both of which are very sort of opaque, bizarre industries. So we really try to demystify that whole process. And then we also offer a 6-month coaching program and some crash courses. And then we have a monthly free workshop as well, which anybody can join. The next one is this tomorrow. The next one is Thursday.
Oh,
That's Thursday. Oh,
yeah,
if it's on the homepage of Book Publicity School, which I don't have up right this second, but I think it's
yeah.
Thursday at noon, and we do it once a month. So definitely feel free to drop in there. Um, and yeah, it's really fun. We're loving it.
Terrific. So, Leah, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today.
You're
Really a
welcome.
pleasure to host you. And everyone, thank you for coming. And I hope to see you in another class soon.
Well, and thank you so much for having me.
Bye bye, everyone. Have a great day.